Hello, my name is Rachel, and I am the Outreach Coordinator at Safe Homes Domestic Violence Center. And today we're going to go over the dynamics of domestic violence, some tips for law enforcement officers, and all of the services that Safe Homes can provide victims of domestic violence so you can properly refer them to us. Make sure that you take the pre and post survey, and the links for both of those are going to be in the description below. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the training. Please take a moment and pause the video so you have time to complete our pre-test. The link for the pre-test is located in the video description below the video. You will have to click on the link and it will take you to a pre-test that is located on another website called SurveyMonkey. To give you an idea about how prevalent domestic violence is, I wanted to share a few statistics with you all. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner. The average age of a victim is 24, and 15.5 million children witnessed domestic violence at least once in the past year. 21% of girls and 10% of boys among high school students who are dating experience physical and or sexual dating violence. And on average, a victim will leave 7 times before permanently leaving their abuser. Now, that does not mean that they will come to safe homes and go back to their abuser on average of 7 times. That could mean that they leave their abuser for the night and go stay in a hotel, or leave their abuser for a week and go stay at a family member's or a friend's house. And only about half of intimate partner physical violence is reported to law enforcement, which means that in reality, these numbers should be much higher than they are. Contrary to what we sometimes hear, domestic violence is not about one or both partners having communication problems. In other words, the issue is not that the aggressor acts impulsively. The definition of domestic violence is a pattern of coercive and controlling behaviors and tactics used by one person over another to gain complete power and control. So the heart of the problem is always going to be an imbalance of power. The abuser learns what it takes to control their victim and reinforce that power imbalance, and they do that over and over and over again. So again, it is a pattern, which means that the abuser's actions are intentional. And although domestic violence is usually perpetrated by men against women, do know that that is not always the case. How a law enforcement officer responds to a domestic violence call can really change the trajectory of that abusive relationship. So I'm going to share with you just a few helpful things that police officers have done for victims in the past. One victim said that a law enforcement officer provided information about my options, including specific safety suggestions and referrals. They have also provided tangible help, like helping me get a protective order, transporting me to safety, or connecting me with a victim's advocate. Or they have arrested or charged the abuser. These are the types of abuse that a perpetrator will use to gain and maintain power and control over their victim. So we have physical abuse, and this is usually the first thing that comes to mind when somebody hears the term abuse or domestic violence. And that is most likely because it is the most easily recognized form of abuse. And it can include punching, hitting, slapping, kicking, and strangulation. And then we have sexual abuse. And while sexual abuse can be a form of physical abuse, we put it in a category on its own because it has physical and non-physical components. It can involve rape or forced uncomfortable sexual positions, but an abuser may also use sexual abuse as a way to assign value to their partner. In other words, they can tell their partner something like, you are not good enough at sex, or that is the only thing that you are good for. And because sex is so loaded with emotional and cultural implications, there are a number of ways that the feelings around it can be uniquely used for gaining and maintaining that power and control. Next, we have financial and economic abuse, and this can include not allowing the victim to have access to any bank accounts. In many cases, the abuser can give the victim an allowance, or the victim is restricted from working. We have heard of many cases where a victim will be getting ready for work, and the abuser will hide the work uniform or disable their car, and eventually they show up to work late enough times without the correct attire on, and they will get fired for that, and the abuser knows it. So they will just do very malicious things like that to make sure that the victim is going to be financially dependent on them. Next, we have verbal and emotional abuse, and this involves name calling intended to make the victim feel like they are not worthy of love or respect. And verbal and emotional abuse can be extremely dangerous because it can go on for long periods of time without really anyone knowing it. The cycle of violence is very important to know because as long as the abuser and the victim are in that relationship, this cycle will continue. And in fact, the time between each one of these phases gets shorter and shorter as that relationship progresses, which is why so many times you will hear a victim say, "I don't know what happened. I feel like I just woke up one day and there I was in an extremely abusive relationship." And that's because when the relationship started, the time between each one of these phases could have been, 6 months to a year. But as that relationship progressed, couples can start going through this cycle very quickly, which is why you will hear law enforcement officers say many times that they have to go to the same house, 2 or 3 times just in one night. So we start with phase 1, and that's the tension building phase. And during this phase, the victim will try really hard not to make any quote-unquote mistakes that may upset the abuser. So they are essentially walking on eggshells around their abuser. And the victim may also deny that they are fearful in an attempt to minimize the seriousness of the threat that they are experiencing. And then in phase 2, this is when the abuse occurs. And this is usually when law enforcement officers do have to get involved. And this is when the, violent episode really explodes. And during this phase, victims are usually unsure why the abuser is so angry, which leaves them feeling very confused and helpless. And they also feel ashamed because they tried so hard to please their partner and, all throughout phase 1, and they feel guilty that they were unable to do that. And then in phase 3, we have our honeymoon phase. And during this phase, the abuser will shower the victim with love and praise. And I want you to understand that it is nearly impossible for the victim to leave their abuser during this phase because they are so desperate for their shattered self-esteem to be repaired. A strong bond develops between the couple, and there's this intense sense of pleasure during this phase that gives the victim a false sense of reassurance that there's nothing wrong in their relationship. But no matter what, we know that the abuse will happen again because this is a cycle. And the more times that the couple goes through this cycle, the greater the intensity of phase 2, the abuse phase, gets. Now we are going to go over some physical warning signs that could indicate that somebody is a victim of domestic violence. And that could include frequent injuries. If someone is being physically abused, they will likely have frequent bruises or physical injuries consistent with being punched, choked, or knocked down. A sprained wrist is very common in a domestic violence relationship because it could suggest that the victim was trying to defend themselves. And attempting to hide bruises is very common. Sometimes victims will try to cover their bruises with makeup or clothing that might be out of season or out of character for them. So if you know somebody and they have on a lot more makeup than they usually do, they could be trying to conceal something. Or if it's 100 degrees outside and they have on a turtleneck and jeans, they most likely are trying to cover something up. An unexplained or sudden soreness, specifically achiness that is not related to any illness that the victim may have, and making excuses for the injury. So if you feel that the person is making an excuse for their injury and the seriousness of the injury does not match up to their explanation, then they could be trying to cover something up. Or if you ask them about the injury and they say that they simply just don't want to talk about it, that could be very concerning. Verbal, nonverbal, and situational warning signs that somebody may be in an abusive relationship include jealousy. Jealousy is a sign of insecurity and lack of trust in a relationship, but the abuser will say that it is a sign of love. The abuser will question the victim about who they are with, accuse them of flirting, or be jealous of time spent with their friends, family, or even their children. Many victims have to ask permission to go anywhere or to meet and socialize with other people, and their partner will constantly call or text them wanting to know where they are at, what they are doing, and who they are with. The abusive partner may even follow the victim to check up on them. Many victims will lose friends because the abuser will isolate them from their family members and their friends, often by behaving rudely to them. In many cases, an abuser will constantly put the victim down, either publicly or privately, by attacking their intelligence, looks, mental health, or capabilities. Abusers will constantly compare victims unfavorably to others. They may even blame the victim for all the problems in the relationship and say things like, well, if you wouldn't have acted that way, I wouldn't have had to react the way that I did. A victim may refer to their partner's temper but might not disclose the extent of the temper or episode of abuse. If you get the feeling that a victim is not telling you quite everything about the episode of abuse, then that could be very concerning. And drug or alcohol use, so victims will in some cases use drugs and alcohol to kind of numb themselves from the abuse that they are experiencing. Many victims are going to show signs of depression and anxiety, and that can be anything from undereating or overeating to suicidal thoughts. And quick involvement. So in many cases, abusers are going to want to rush into the relationship and tell the victim things like, I've never felt this way before, I feel like I can tell you anything and I just love you so much. And then they will start showing their true colors, which is going to be their abusive actions. Anytime I tell somebody I work for a domestic violence center, the first thing they want to ask me is, well, why do victims stay? Why do you think a victim would stay in a relationship with somebody who abuses them? But we never want to ask a question like that because that is putting blame on the victim, and the blame should not be put on the victim. It should be put on the perpetrator. And leaving an abusive relationship is extremely difficult, and it can be extremely dangerous. The risk to survivors is highest when they decide to leave. In fact, the risk of a woman being killed by her abuser increases 70 times in the first 2 weeks after she leaves. The barriers model is a visual to help outsiders understand what could potentially be holding the victim where they are. So some key assumptions when looking at the barriers model, there are a few things that we need to keep in mind. And the first thing is safety. And safety is the primary goal of intervention. And the primary barriers to the victim's safety are external, not internal. And batterer control is the most significant factor to escape. Some environmental and community barriers that the victim may have to overcome before they can leave the abusive relationship include the batterer. So the batterer may be somebody who is very well known and liked in the community, and the victim fears that nobody would believe them when they come out and start telling people about all the abusive things that this person does to them behind closed doors. We also have no information or misinformation. Some people just simply don't know that Safe Homes is here to help. And if they do know about Safe Homes, they might not know to the extent of the services that we provide, or that we are free and all of our services are confidential. Of course, money is a huge barrier. A lot of these victims are experiencing financial abuse, and that may be keeping them dependent on the abuser. Some women and men, but majority of times victims are going to be women. A lot of women either can make the choice to stay in the relationship with their abuser or be homeless with their children. And then we also have transportation. A victim could be experiencing isolation abuse, which would keep them from being able to get to safety. And then we have criminal justice response. Some victims do seek help and do not get the response that they are looking for, and so then they will be hesitant to reach back out to law enforcement again. A victim may stay in the abusive relationship because they fear that they will be ostracized by the community if they make the decision to leave their abuser. They may believe that it would be dishonorable to the family if there was a divorce or if other people found out about the abuse. There's this belief that children should always come first. It can be really hard for people who have never been in an abusive relationship to understand why a victim will leave their spouse and put their children through a single parenthood life. Religious values is also a huge reason why somebody may stay. The victim could have a strong relationship with a higher power and think that the higher power would never give them more than they could handle. They could also think that maybe if they would just pray about it more, that it will get better. There's this belief that jealousy and stalking is romantic. The abuser will convince the victim that they are being so controlling because the connection and love they feel for this person is so strong. And we also have to understand that violence is normal in hierarchy in the family, in some cultures, and especially violence against women is very prevalent in some cultures. Sometimes victims will self-medicate themselves with drugs or alcohol to help them feel better about the situation. And we've also seen cases where the abuser has forced a drug or alcohol addiction on the victim. For example, an abuser may give the victim a pill, such as the Xanax, every day before they leave the house. And eventually, they will get addicted to that pill. And if you think about it, somebody's going to be a whole lot easier to gain and maintain power and control over when they are under the influence of a substance like that. Now, moving on to self-blame, self-doubt, and just a complete eroded self-esteem, it is going to be very hard for somebody to build up the courage and confidence to leave an abusive relationship when all they have been told for the past, extended amount of time is that they are no good, that nobody else is going to want them, and that they are completely worthless. Once you are told that enough times, you will start to internalize that and actually believe it. And we have memory impairment. After somebody experiences something extremely traumatic, it is going to be very difficult for them to explain what happened to somebody else in a chronological order. So especially when law enforcement officers arrive on scene, it is really hard for the victim to tell the story and have it make sense to the person who is trying to help them. And in turn, it's going to be hard for that person to actually help them properly. And brainwashing effects. So usually victims are completely brainwashed just because the abuser has been telling them all these negative things about them. And then we have isolation, and this is where the abuser keeps the victim from their family, their friends, and anyone outside of the relationship. Once a victim withdraws so many times from their family and their friends, the people that usually show them support might not be there for them anymore. The loved ones might feel that they have tried all they can in the past and that the victim is not willing to help them, and they will just shut the victim out of their lives. And this can cause the victim to not have anyone to run to when they really are ready to take the first step to get help. When you arrive on scene and you suspect domestic violence, here are a few phrases that you can use to start that dialogue between you and the potential victim. And of course, you will cater these questions to what you have already observed on scene thus far. You can ask things like, do you feel safe at home? Does your partner ever hit, kick, grab, push, or choke you? Does your partner constantly criticize you, call you names, or put you down? And does your partner control your everyday life? It is extremely important for law enforcement officers to make a good domestic violence case because their report will most likely be used in the event that the victim pursues a temporary protective order against the abuser, or if the victim needs to gain custody of the children for safety reasons. So always make sure that you follow these key tips when you are writing a report. You'll want to document the party's location upon arrival, have the victim write or tape a statement, inquire about previous DV incidents. As we know, a history of domestic violence is a great indicator for whether or not domestic violence is currently happening. As we talked about previously in this presentation, when we discussed the cycle of violence, as long as the abuser and the victim stay in that relationship, domestic violence will continue to occur. It is a cycle. Always make sure you interview parties separately. I cannot stress that enough. You want to make sure the victim and the abuser cannot see or hear each other. This will be a great time for the abuser to continue trying to gain and maintain that power and control over their victim by simply using body language or snarky remarks. So make sure they are separated. Also, take pictures and describe in detail the victim's and the suspect's injuries or lack of, and keep in mind that bruises will not show up immediately. So you need to ask the victim questions about where they are hurting or where they might be sore. When giving a victim resources, do not disclose to the abuser that you gave the victim options. Many abusers might not even know that a domestic violence shelter exists for the victim. Also, do not allude to the victim's plan. Always give information to the victim discreetly. I know that my domestic violence center, Safe Homes, we have business-sized cards for law enforcement officers to give victims that will be a little bit more discreet than, let's say, a brochure. So give information as discreetly as possible. Explain to the victim that they can talk to an advocate about all of their options. Let them know that there is somebody out there that is trained specifically with dealing with somebody who is in their situation. Explain their rights and inform them about temporary protective orders. Many victims are going to be extremely scared about what is going to happen if they try to leave their abuser, because as we know, that is the most dangerous time. So make sure they are aware that a temporary protective order exists and explain to them exactly what that will do for them. And also let them know that everything that a domestic violence shelter can offer them is going to be free and confidential. So make sure they know they do not have to have a certain type of insurance in order to gain access to our services. Everything is free and everything is confidential. The remainder of the training will be all about Safe Homes of Augusta and the services that this agency is able to provide victims of domestic violence. Our mission is to transform victims of domestic violence into survivors. And the vision is a community free from domestic violence through education, awareness, and advocacy. Safe Homes serves 10 counties in the state of Georgia, and we are the only state-certified domestic violence center in those 10 counties. Those 10 counties include Burke, Columbia, Glasscock, Jefferson, Lincoln, McDuffie, Richmond, Tolliver, Warren, and Wilkes. And while a majority of our clients are women, we serve and provide all of our services to men as well. So now we're going to go over the history of Safe Homes and a little bit about how this nonprofit got started. So in 1979, an informal coalition of women in Augusta was formed for the purpose of seeking ways to assist women who were victims of domestic violence. And at that time, there were no other community resources for domestic violence victims. And then in 1983, Safe Homes opened and provided shelter to female victims. And by 1985, services have been extended to over 500 women. And in 2013, Safe Homes broke ground on their new facilities and started their capital campaign. And then in 2016, Safe Homes moved into their new facilities. And this move allowed Safe Homes to not only expand their administrative offices, but also the shelter. The shelter went from being able to house 16 clients to being able to house 24. And that's where we are at today. In 2018, Safe Homes provided over 16,000 services, and 1,863 individual clients were served. And of those clients, 462 of them were children. We sheltered 240 individuals for a total of 4,463 nights, and over 10,000 people received prevention education. Of the clients who left the Safe Home shelter in 2018, 97% of them secured safe housing. 82% of them gained a means of financial support. 86% of them achieved personal goals that they set for themselves. 98% of them enhanced safety strategies, and 98% of them also gained knowledge of community resources. Safe Homes is a nonprofit, so a majority of our funding does come from government grants. And then we also have funding through non-governmental grants. There are different foundations who have grants available for nonprofits, such as the Mary Kay Foundation and Allstate and Walmart, and we are able to apply for these grants every year. And then 10% of our funds come through fundraising events. And the largest fundraising event of the year that we host is Fake It to Make It, and it is held at the Miller Theater in Augusta, Georgia every year. And then 4% of our funds come through individual contributions, and you can always make a donation to us online or by calling our office. And 6% of our funds come through in-kind donations and volunteer hours that we get match money for. And I do want to say we have no national ties to any organization. Safe Homes has a 24/7 crisis hotline. No matter what, a trained individual will be available on the other end of that crisis hotline to talk with the victim and go through the options with them. Do keep in mind that we can only talk directly to the victim for confidentiality purposes, but we will always meet the victim where they are at. Some victims are going to call this crisis hotline and not be ready to leave or participate in any of our other services, and that they just need somebody to talk to and maybe help create a safety plan. So no matter what, just always encourage a victim to call our crisis hotline, just so they know that there is an advocate out there who really cares for them and wants what is best for them. Safe Homes has a 30-day emergency shelter, and it is a community-style living shelter, so sometimes our clients do have to share a room, but we always keep the family together. While a client is in shelter, we provide them with absolutely everything that they need. We use donations from community members to provide them with clothing as soon as they arrive at our shelter. And then, of course, we provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and transportation as well. We try to allow them to live their life as normal as possible, as long as it's safe to do so. Now, in some cases, it's not going to be safe for, let's say, the children to continue going to the same school. And if that is the case, we do help them make other accommodations. We have a children's advocate to assist any children who come into the shelter with their parents, as well as a teen advocate to assist them. And we plan activities throughout the week for children and teens of all ages. We unfortunately cannot house animals at the Safe Home Shelter at this time, but there is this incredible organization out of Atlanta called the Hisms House, whose mission is to help pets who have owners who are victims of domestic violence. So they are able to pay for the animal to be boarded and to pay for all of their shots and all of that good stuff, and they will pay for that animal to be boarded right where the Safe Home Shelter is or very nearby. So we also partner with other domestic violence shelters. We work closely with them, so if a client needs to go somewhere, let's say for safety purposes, we do help them get there. And then we also provide residential aftercare. So once a client leaves the shelter, we will follow up with them throughout the following year. We help in any way that we can. We really want to make sure that they continue on the path to becoming a survivor. And we want to allow them to continue living a self-sufficient life while providing any necessary services that they still may need from us. Here are some pictures of the Safe Homes shelter, and as you can tell, it is a very nice shelter and it is very up to date. We try to make sure that it is as welcoming as possible for our clients. The top left-hand picture is a picture of our children's playroom. Then the top right is a picture of a bed, and we do have 24 beds available in our shelter, and we always try to keep the mother and children together in the same room. Then on the bottom left, we have a picture of our meditation room, and this allows our clients to have a place to have some time alone if they need it. And we also conduct counseling appointments in this room as well if needed. And the bottom right hand picture is going to be a picture of our kitchen. So as you can tell, we have a really large kitchen where staff and volunteers will prepare breakfast, lunch, and dinner for our shelter clients. And we also do allow other organizations and volunteers to drop off prepared meals at our administrative desk, and we will make sure that they get to the clients in our shelter. The left-hand picture is our teen room, and this is where teens can go to hang out, play Wii, watch television, or play a variety of board games that are provided for them. And then our right-hand picture is the common and dining area, and this is where clients can watch television, spend time with other clients, and even eat their meals. And not pictured is our multi-purpose room, which is the room that allows our clients to have access to the internet, to look for jobs, a place to live, or any other use of computers that they might have. Navigating the legal system can be very intimidating for someone who is undergoing a great deal of emotional stress and trauma. So Safe Homes is here to help by accompanying the clients to court, assisting them with the paperwork for the temporary protective order, and following up on their behalf until the process is complete. So a temporary protective order, for those of you who do not know, will require the abuser to stop any abuse. It will also require the abuser to remain at least 500 yards from the victim and their children. And this is usually a 12-month order that is signed by a judge. And we also collaborate with other organizations. Our legal advocate collaborates with Georgia Legal and other attorneys based on the client's particular situation and qualifications. Our counseling program offers individual counseling to both the survivors and their children. In addition, there is a variety of therapeutic groups that are available. The Safe Homes counselors facilitate a weekly support group that is focused on empowerment and creating a sense of community, while also providing important tools that will promote healing and growth. For our children clients, there is an 8-week therapeutic group called Magic in Me. And this group strives to address any trauma and stress-related symptoms and teach the basics of personal and body safety through a variety of interactive activities and play. We also offer a 12-week no drama discipline class, and this is a trauma-focused parenting group that gives our survivor parents the tools to promote healthy relationships between the parent and the child, while also addressing any misbehaviors and conflict. The principles taught in this parenting group can begin to heal the wounds in the relationship between the parents and the children that family violence may have left behind. In addition to all of those groups, we also offer career counseling, daily case management, and various other workshops. Volunteers support shelter residents through conversation, instruction, and/or written information in the development of essential life skills in any of the following areas based on their personal knowledge base and comfort level. And some of those classes include financial literacy, self-defense, yoga, empowerment, goal setting, nutrition, and financial education. Safe Homes is the only state-certified domestic violence center for the East Central Georgia region. And because our offices are located in Richmond County, we really strive to eliminate the transportation barrier that is very common for clients in the outlying counties that we serve by making an advocate available to meet clients at a safe location so we can help them fill out the initial client intake or assist them with paperwork that is required for requesting a temporary protective order. We are also available to provide transportation for clients to our facility for services, or we can even relocate them to safety. Safe Homes has a youth development coordinator that goes into the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high schools to teach the youth and the teens about healthy relationships and self-respect, because if they are not seeing a healthy relationship being modeled at home, that cycle of violence is likely to continue. So we want to be a lot more preventative and not so reactive in our efforts to help combat domestic violence. And our youth development coordinator can also help develop an age-appropriate safety plan for the youth and teens. If you want to get more involved with Safe Homes and our mission to transform victims of domestic violence, here's how you can do that. So the first thing you can do is host a training. We have various trainings, and our trainings can be anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour and a half. And we have job-specific and organization-specific trainings that we can offer. For example, we have one for healthcare professionals, and we have one for law enforcement officers, and we even have a domestic violence in the workplace training that we can offer. You can donate on the first Friday of every month at Warren Baptist, the Edge location, but always make sure that you check on our website at www.safehomesdv.org to see what we are in need of at that time. So you can host a collection drive, you can attend one of our fundraising events, and go follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, so you can stay up to date on all of our current events. We have various volunteer opportunities, Some of those opportunities do involve some training, but we have some that don't. So you can cook a meal. Obviously, we do have to provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner to our clients in the shelter every single day. So having an individual or a group or even a business cook a meal and drop it off at our shelter is super important and is very helpful. You can organize, inventory, and distribute donations for us. You can attend one of our many community events that we get invited to and just set up an information table to let people know about Safe Homes and make sure that everyone in our community is aware that we are a resource here to help victims of domestic violence. You can help watch the children who are in our shelter. You can teach a life skills class. You can help provide administrative support, and so many more options are available to those who really want to get involved and assist these victims of domestic violence. Thank you to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for funding this project, and also make sure that you complete the POST test, and the link for that is going to be below the video in the description.